It's time to rethink, renew, and reimagine retirement. Welcome to Retire Repurposed. This podcast is dedicated to help people transition into fulfilling and purposeful retirements. Retirement is a big life change. In fact, the two most dangerous years of a person's life are the year they were born and the year they retire. We believe that retirement is not the end, rather the beginning of what could be the most impactful season of a person's life. So don't retire, become repurposed. Well, I'm your host, Jared Sebest. I'm the co-founder of Retire Repurposed alongside Ben Tejas. Thank you so much for joining us today. Maybe you found us on the radio. Maybe you found us online. Regardless, head over to iTunes, find our podcast, subscribe, and better yet, leave us a quick positive rating and review. If you just take a moment and do that, we would appreciate that so much. Now, this podcast is all about retirement, but it's not about money. It's about the non-financial parts of retirement, which many times can be even more challenging than the financial. Few people can just flip the switch from working a career 30, 40 plus years, shutting it off on Retirement Friday without methodical steps to living what we would call a repurposed retirement. If you want more for your life and your retirement, then you have come to the right place. Well, on this episode, we continue our brand new series on retirement habits. Healthy habits are important at any time in your life, but especially in retirement. Time is one of your greatest assets if you are a retiree. But if you have bad habits, that time will work against you. Today, we cover the habit of positive self-talk. The truth is, words are powerful, and many times the most hurtful words spoken to us are from ourselves. In this podcast, Ben explains a scientific study that reveals the true power of our words and how they can either be our greatest ally in retirement or accelerate the process of getting old. Enjoy this podcast. All right, folks, welcome back. Thank you so much for tuning into the podcast here today. Before we get started with today's show, which is going to be all about positive self-talk, just a reminder, we got a brand new Facebook group called Becoming Repurposed in Retirement. Join a growing community of people that refuse to accept the typical American dream retirement. Look for more tips on living repurposed, Facebook Lives, Q&A sessions, special content. It's all there. Go to facebook.com and search Becoming Repurposed in Retirement. Click join to be part of this community of people ready to make their retirement everything it was supposed to be. Well, this week we continue this brand new mini-series on retirement habits, and we introduced this series last week because this is the time to really have good habits. Retirement is a bad time to fall into bad habits. You've got things working against you. You've got time working against you. You've got your physical capabilities working against you. But if you use your time right and you develop or maintain healthy habits, this can be a time where you really begin to walk into your fullness. Ben Tejas joins me on the show here today. And Ben, last week we talked about this first one, having a heart of gratitude. And we felt like that was, if we're going to start a series on habits, we've got to start with this one.
Yeah, Jared, I think one of the important things we talked about last week was just how important it is to begin and end each day with gratitude, right? I mean, you think about so many times it's easier to think about the negative things in life. Man, if we can just flip that and think about the positive things, right? It's much easier on your life just to stay positive.
Yeah, a great habit in retirement, again, beginning each day and ending each day with gratitude. We talked about how that last hour that you're awake each day is one of the most powerful hours of your day. And if you can end it with I don't want to say a positive vibe, but really just being in prayer, meditation, being thankful, having a heart of gratitude, that's going to pay dividends for your next day and certainly your life. Another huge takeaway last week for me was talking about how this idea of gratitude is really, it's a catalyst for joy. I mean, you want the antidote for depression, isolation, being downtrodden, kind of being a grumpy Gus, having that type of heart, having a heart of gratitude and choosing that is a massive, massive piece to the puzzle.
Yeah, it's more, it's so much easier. You can't just not or try not to be crabby, right? It's much easier you have to replace being crabby with something positive. Right. So again, if you can replace the negative with a positive and just be full of gratitude, the people around you certainly will thank you too.
They're going to be happier as well, certainly. If you missed last week's show, again, I encourage you to go check that out. We spent an entire show just talking about having a heart of gratitude. So today we're going to transition into habit number 2, and this is a perfect segue from last week's show. Today we're going to spend some time talking about positive self-talk. Ben, we've got a huge show, an action-packed show here today. Let's get started first by answering the question, why is this concept so important? Why are words so important?
Well, words are important. I mean, I can remember as a kid, and you probably did too, and if you're listening to this, I can almost guarantee you have heard the saying, "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me," right? We've heard that before. The problem with that is it's a lie. That is so false. I mean, sticks and stones, yes, they may break your bones, but words will hurt you even worse. And you know what will hurt you even worse than just words from others? Words from yourself.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. As we continued to get a little older, Ben, you and I are both kind of middle-aged, so to speak. You're starting to see kind of how words can mold and shape how you think. They're going to mold and shape your experiences. They're going to mold and shape how you view past experiences. And I think one theme that you're going to get as you listen to today's show is that we do have a choice in a lot of the words that we say and the narrative that we write on our lives. But I would agree with you. I would almost say, and you could argue this point, physical trauma is difficult to recover from. Mental trauma that's endured from other people is hard to recover from, and almost harder. But sometimes your own worst enemy is the thoughts and the words that you say to yourselves, because these are the ones that can have the most impact on your psyche and your day and your attitude. And this does translate into our physical health as well, which again is another point here we want to bring up today.
Yeah, when you think about, if you break a bone, I think it's fairly simple. My daughter just broke her thumb during her volleyball season, and I'm not going to take anything away from the doctors, but they did a great job of putting it in a cast and holding it, still for a period of time so it can heal. Right. I think that healing the mind is quite a bit more. There's a lot more to it, right? There's a lot more moving parts there. The brain's an unbelievable thing, and the way we think is so complex, Jared, that I think many times fixing a broken bone can be much simpler than actually fixing really what happens with, I'm not going to say a broken brain, but a brain where you have heard things over and over from others, right, or you're hearing things over and over from yourself. That's a much more challenging thing, and I think a much more time consuming, and it takes a lot longer for somebody to heal from that.
Definitely. I think a lot of people out there listening may think that there's, this is some sort of like foo-foo show where it's just, if we just use positive words and have a positive attitude, everything's going to be okay. And there might be a little bit of that, but, there actually is some science behind some of the things we're talking about.
Yeah, there is, Jared. I've actually been reading a book recently by John Acuff, and if you don't remember, he was on our podcast a while back, and we do follow John, and I think he does some great work. He's pretty popular right now with his book Soundtracks, and I'm one that, many times I can overthink things, and that's really what the book is about. But in the book, he talks a lot about this idea of really replacing the negative soundtracks in your mind with positive ones. And two, I'm reading this at first, I'm thinking, John, this sounds foo-foo. This sounds like we're all sitting in a circle, lighting candles and listening to this, but really there's science to it. He brings up a study that was done at New York University where they studied how different words can actually be so powerful when we're reading them and seeing them, they can make us feel a certain way. And what they did in the study, they had a couple groups, and both groups were told to make as many sentences as they could. But the two groups of people had different words in the word group. And hidden in the group of words for one of the groups were ideas that were related to old age. So words like bald, Florida, and wrinkle were actually sprinkled in throughout the collection of words.
Sorry, Florida, if anybody from Florida is listening.
That's right. But at the end of the word challenge, the scientists told the participants to actually walk down the hall to complete the second portion of the study in another classroom. This is coming right from John's book. as they made their way down, the real test began. Scientists secretly were timing the students to see how long it took them to make this short walk. And what's interesting is that the students exposed to the set of old age words actually walked slower.
Wow.
So what that showed was that actually just reading the words about being elderly could actually cause a physical change. And Acuff goes on and he talks about how the Nobel Prize winner, Daniel Kahneman, I think I'm pronouncing that right, defines as this is influencing of an action by an idea or priming. He states that it's the idea motor effect, and it works both ways. I think that's important.
Right.
Like your thoughts and ideas influence your actions, and your actions influence your thoughts.
Yeah, and I would even go on to say they influence your physical health and demeanor as well. That's a really interesting concept. I've never heard that before. And John Acuff's book, Soundtracks, is not on retirement, certainly, but it doesn't take a rocket scientist to connect the dots here between retirement. You've always said, Ben, that the physical act of retirement is more detrimental to somebody's health, physical, mental, spiritual, than actually getting older. Stepping away from work is more detrimental and hurts more than the other stuff.
Yeah, I think aging, there's much more aging that comes from the act of retirement than actually just getting older. Remember, I'll say it again.
Right.
There's much more to aging. Just retiring makes you age much faster than just getting older. It might sound strange, but part of this is, and I want people to hear this, and when I read books, I oftentimes read them through the lens of what could a retiree take from this, right? And John Acuff's book on Soundtracks, again, it's less about the overthinking, although when we have more time, many times we do overthink things. But for a retiree today, when I read that, and I'm like, man, this is a lot of our retirees where they're told by society.
Yes.
They're told over and over, well, you're old. They see that and they hear that.
Right.
I think the easiest way to start to be old and to act old is to think that you're old.
Exactly.
Right? It isn't as simple as saying, well, I'm not going to age, but you can dramatically change that, really how fast you're aging by simply just having this idea of positive self-talk. And again, we are faced with a society that's telling you the exact opposite.
Exactly. Yeah. So again, retirees are fighting an uphill battle because they probably have friends, family, perhaps the place that they're working telling them that they're old. It's time to step aside. And society in general is telling you to go act old. And again, I think that is not only an awareness piece for retirees listening, but also a challenge to say, don't accept that. Don't accept that thought. Don't accept that type of self-talk. Because if you don't want to be retired and you don't want to get old, then don't talk about the things that old people talk about. And again, that's no disrespect to that group of people. But let's not make our life just about what doctor's appointments we have and what pharmaceuticals we're taking, because that's unfortunately is a lot of the conversation that happens among that crowd.
It does. I can remember listening to John Maxwell at one of his speaking events, and he said that. He said he went back to one of his class reunions, and he said, yeah, I was talking with all my friends, and they were talking about their medications and everything else medical they had. And he says, I didn't know I went to school with a bunch of pharmacists,
yeah, exactly.
But that's the reality, right? And he's fighting back, right? This is a guy that's still, a major influencer today, still writing books every single day. He's chosen, he doesn't see himself as one of these older people that's sitting there talking about, what medicines they're on.
Right.
He's thinking about, how can I impact and change the people around me? How can I lead a company, and how can I stay relevant today? And that's what we want for retirees.
That reminds me of another gentleman we had on the show named Scott Thoma, and he goes around and actually interviews retirees and baby boomers and just tells their story. And he has interviewed a number of people in their 80s, 90s, and even in their 100s. And I asked him when he was on the show, I said, what separates these people from kind of the rest of the crowd? And the one thing that he said that they refuse to get old. They refuse to accept the fact that indeed they're getting older. And if you're listening to this show and you're in your 60s or 70s or 80s, big deal. Like that, you should be wearing that as a badge of honor, but that doesn't mean that you need to accept it. Let that get into your thoughts And then, again, tell yourself that you're getting older, because I got to tell you, man, if you are what you're going to say that you are, you're your own best salesman. So if you think that you're old and you're too old to do stuff, and you hear this, man, a lot in the financial practice side of our practice, a lot of people will say that if they're just too old to do something, you indeed will become too old to do it.
Yeah, you start to believe it. And again, that's what we're talking about with this positive self-talk is, there's science to this. We understand there's science to what you say and how it reinforces your actions, and then your actions reinforce your thoughts. So the key is have the knowledge that, yes, I'm a little bit older, but don't continue to dwell or think about that stuff, because again, it's going to cause that aging process to even go faster.
You bet. So understanding the importance of words, the power of words, that's our first point today. Second thing we want to talk about, Ben, is that when we start developing this new habit of more positive self-talk, there's a specific filter that those thoughts need to run through.
Yeah, Jared, you got to run it through a faith filter. Philippians 4 verse 8 says, "Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever's true, whatever's noble, whatever's right, whatever's pure, whatever's lovely, whatever's admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things." Right? You read that and you're thinking, man, this is to keep me away from sinning or thinking, about sinful things. And actually, I read that and I say, it comes back to this positive self-talk, right? So many times, the things that we're putting into our mind, right, can also dramatically affect how we feel about ourselves.
Absolutely.
And our own self-image.
Yeah, and again, the Bible just talks directly about it. It says, think about such things. I mean, it's literally right there. Like, if you think that this self-talk thing isn't a real thing or a biblical thing, it's right there.
It is right there. I mean, so many times I think people, I'm even reading this now in this Soundtracks book from John Acuff. He says the same. He's like, well, there's 3 questions. He doesn't tie it back to the Bible. He says 3 questions you should ask when you're thinking about, these soundtracks that are going off in your mind. The things that I'm hearing is it true? Is it helpful? Is it kind? It feels like I've read that somewhere before, right? When you think about so many of the books that I read lately, I'm like, if I go back and I just follow what it says in Scripture, right? It many times, I think that people more often than not need to be reminded more than they need to be instructed. That's a quote from Samuel Johnson, one of my favorites, and he says that. I believe that. I think so many times people just need that reminder. They don't need something new and instructed. They need a reminder. So we're reminding you when you're running through these thoughts, run them through that faith filter. Philippians 4 verse 8.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I find myself telling my kids that when they want to, make a statement about their brother or sister. It's like, before you open your mouth, is it true? Is it helpful? Is it kind? And again, that's important. But is that the same filter we're running through our own thoughts and what we're saying about ourselves? I think that is just as important as the latter. Another thing we want to encourage people to do, and also I think not only encourage, but just kind of bring awareness to, you have the ability to change the narrative on the things that are being said about you. That you're not just at the beck and call of life circumstances all the time. Yes, there's many things that are going to happen to you that you cannot control, but how they are perceived, the narrative in which they land in your head and your psyche and in your mentality, you have the ability to change those. So let's spend some time and just talk about some of these more negative words and things that we can turn them into. Yeah,
the one I always think about is the words disappointed versus delayed. Jared, I look at when I fly, anytime I go to the airport, how many times haven't we been delayed?
Right.
You would think we would almost start to expect that from travel. But in fact, we aren't. Many times we're like, oh, disappointed. We got, delayed again. So instead of saying we're disappointed, just say, we're delayed.
Yeah, big deal.
It's going to take a little more time. Be actually engineering into your travel. So, if that happens, I'm already thinking in my mind, yep, I am going to be delayed. And therefore, when I actually
land on
happens,
time.
I'm even more excited.
But
then when you get the delay, you're able to say, yeah, I built some things into my day to say, yeah, I'm delayed, but here's how I'm going to, like you said, how I'm going to react to that, what we're going to call disappointment is, no, I'm not just disappointed. I'm just delayed.
Yep. Big deal. So I get to spend a little bit more time reading. I get to spend a little bit more time on the phone, maybe more time with my family sitting in the airport terminal. It's how you look at it. That's what we're trying to say. A big one that comes up in a lot of self-help books is failure versus learning. I read somewhere where they said there's no such thing as losing. Life isn't about winning and losing. It's about winning and learning. Everybody's experienced failures, but how we view those failures, long after it happened, the failure itself sometimes isn't that big a deal. It's the weeks, months, and years after where we replay it in our head and we beat ourselves up over that failure.
Yeah, I mean, if you can look at failures as opportunities to learn, you talk to any successful person, they will say they've had tons of failures. They almost always don't call them failures. They say they were opportunities to learn and make things better.
Yep, exactly. Some of you out there might be tired, exhausted. Instead of asking yourself, why is this happening? Why do bad things always happen to me? We said this on last week's show. Why is it's probably one of the worst questions to ask when bad things happen. The better question to ask is, what is God trying to show me? So if you're tired out there, you're exhausted, you're a little bit beat up from life, we feel for you. We've all been there and are all there in some capacity, but look at it through the lens of, how is God trying to build my endurance? How is he trying to build my character? How is he trying to build my patience? That's just a different way to look at it. Ben, what's another one?
Well, I think when we feel nervous, try to think, no, I'm not nervous. I'm energized, right? The body actually is very good at helping you through things that might generally cause anxiety, right? And use that as a positive. Say, yeah, I'm feeling nervous. Use that energy that your body is creating to say, yeah, I'm not going to be so nervous about this. I'm going to be energized and take control of the situation.
I think this last one, too, kind of piggybacks off of that. Instead of saying, I have to do this, I've got to go here and I've got to talk to this person. I've got to do this chore. I have to do this project. You say, I get to. I've got an opportunity to do it. Ben, I've had a chance to go on stage and speak in front of hundreds of audiences. And I got to be honest, lots of times that night before, I'm nervous. And I'm kind of wishing I don't have to do this. But if I change how I think about it, this is an opportunity. I get a chance to go in front of a group of people and share a message or share a story. It changes the whole dynamic. I sleep better at night when I've got that attitude. I'm thankful for the opportunity, not, oh my goodness, I got to travel to such and such town and do this thing tomorrow.
Yeah, again, I think the goal here, we don't want to pretend that the emotions aren't there, Jared, right? We want to deal with them on our own terms. I'm a guy that I've had bouts of anxiety in my life. I'd just be, really transparent with our listeners. I've seen a counselor, Jared, and I think if you're out there today and you're thinking, man, I would need some help in there, go see somebody. There's many, in fact, I would say most successful people have talked to somebody about the things they're going through. Sometimes it's a professional, sometimes it's not. But I can remember one of the things that the guy I was seeing said. He said, Ben, you keep saying, yeah, I feel so anxious, or I'm actually feeling depressed, and I hate that I feel this way. Why I hate that I feel this way? He said, no, you need to accept, yes, I feel this way, but then learn to deal with this on your own terms. I can remember him over and over saying that because, again, I'd come in and say, why do I feel this way? I mean, why do I feel this way over and over, and I shouldn't feel this way? No, you do feel this way. Right. That is part of how you feel. Now, let's figure out how to deal with that.
Yeah, well, I just think of the Bible verse, don't sin in your anger. It doesn't say never be angry. I think lots of times as Christians, it's like, it's unrighteous to feel angry. There's nothing wrong with feeling angry. We're emotional beings. Having big emotions is part of the human experience. I mean, that's a gift that God gave us. We're not just dead inside. You know what I mean? So I like what you're trying to say there. We have the emotions. So be it. You feel certain things. Okay. But learn how to get in control of those emotions, get in control of those thoughts. And again, you have the choice and the power to, write the narrative on those things. And even the past experience that you have that may, change the way that you think today. So be it. Go back and rewrite the message, the narrative on some of those experiences. I think that's a huge piece for everybody.
Yeah. And the best part, Jared, we know that God has the power to renew our minds, right? It says very clearly again, Romans 12:2, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. So we know, because we serve an awesome God, that He is able to work within us to renew our mind. It's up to us,
right,
again, to look at what we're bringing into and thinking about. If we can make it more positive, if we can give those things to God and say, what are you doing in my life today? How can you help me as a retiree, as a person trying to do my best? How can you help me help my mind be renewed?
2 Corinthians 10:5 says, take every thought captive and make it obedient to Christ. I would challenge you to be in tune to the words that you say to others, but just as important, the words that you are saying to yourself. Thank you again for joining us today. If you'd like to get a copy of Ben's book, Repurpose, The Untold Story of Retirement in America, just go to our website, retirerepurposed.com. Until next time, I'm Jared Sebesta. Remember, don't retire, become repurposed. We'll see you then.
Securities offered through Avantax Investment Services. Member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Avantax Advisory Services. Insurance services offered through an Avantax affiliated insurance agency.